Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's audio discussion. In this discussion, we will be looking at the security and political outlook of Mali following the end of the transition period. But before we look at the rest of the details and official kickstart the discussion, it's important to introduce ourselves. So I am Sitati Wasilwa, an Information Services Manager for Europe, Middle East, and Africa at APAC Assistance. And with me is my colleague, Dr. Ramu, a Senior Geopolitical Analyst at APAC Assistance. And to set the ball rolling, a brief context on the political developments in Mali is that the two-year transition period officially ended on the 26th of March, and the military-led government is yet to publicly communicate on the way forward. Presidential elections, which were to pave the way for return to civilian leadership, were to be held on the 4th and 18th of February, but these elections were postponed last year in September, where the military-led government cited technical reasons. Quite interesting. Anyway, new election dates have not been set, and it's against this backdrop that political tensions are rising in Mali. But of course, we can further give a little bit more details regarding the background of the situation over in Mali and the related political developments. I know maybe Ramu, you've also been keeping tabs with the situation in Mali. I don't know. Maybe you can take us through some of these notable developments from your end, how you look at it.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Sitati. I'll just give you a very basic chronological overview about what events have transpired ever since on March 26th, when the transitional period officially ended, and without any proper official communication from the military-led government. A few days later, on March 31st, over 80 political parties and civil society groups issued a joint statement calling on the military-led government to hold presidential elections. They urged the military to facilitate elections to pave the way for civilian leadership. But these actions have so far remained futile. And on April 9th, the military-led government issued a decree suspending all activities of political parties for an indefinite period. By indefinite period, it's still uncertain. I mean, whether there will be like a harsh clampdown on opposition protests by the civil intelligentsia or by the opposition parties, the mainstream parties. So the regime stated that the suspension aims at maintaining quote unquote public order. Sitati, if you could enlighten us about what have happened ever since after that, I mean, it would be like a great value addition to this debate.
Yes, I mean, as you mentioned, those several, chronological political events which have happened in Mali over the last month or so. To pick up from where you left, on the 10th of April, political parties and civil society groups openly rejected the military regime's order to suspend political parties. And they vowed to legally challenge the decree which was issued, and they termed that particular decree as dictatorial. Later on, 3 days after that, on April 13th, 7 political parties boycotted the national dialogue as a protest to the suspension of the party's activities by the military-led government. And this sort of dialogue was a 3-day event which commenced on the 13th of April and lasted until April 15th. And just a little bit of a context on this dialogue, the Mali military-led government organized an inter-parties dialogue to try and find solutions to the socio-economic and political challenges affecting the country. I mean, this is a little bit hilarious. It's a little bit interesting. I mean, already the military-led government knows what sort of challenges Mali is facing. But I think it's more of a strategy to try and drag things around and buy time a little bit. Anyway, we will get probably more details on that. But I think what lays ahead, in fact, for businesses, it's important. I mean, to paint a picture of what the security and political situation could look like. Political tensions are obviously rising, but there could be more to this. I don't know, Ramu, on your end, what do you think is likely to unfold as far as these tensions are concerned?
Well, yeah, it's a good question, obviously. I mean, it's maybe like, it's hard to give an elaborate answer. I'll try to be as concise as possible. Yeah, so naturally, political parties and the civil society organizations feel quite aggrieved by the military's decision to suspend all political party activities. This will motivate these groups to call out the military, and they are very likely to popularize the military regime's lack of an official governing mandate. Because legally speaking, there is no mandate on the part of the military. I mean, because the transitional government was supposed to end on March 26th. I mean, this extension was not part of the legal mandate. And these groups could entirely withdraw from the national dialogue process as a protest against the decree to suspend political activities. And this is quite imperative in the context of, like trying to analyze Mali from, the current circumstances regarding its geographical positioning as well as regarding its colonial history. So Mali is part of the three or four countries in the West African region, which is also part of the former French colonies, the La Francophonie. Like for example, the other nations are Burkina Faso, you have Niger, and then you have Guinea, which have had pushes regimes like military-led governments over the past half a decade or so, and these governments actually came to power mostly on the back of like raging sentiments, raging anti-French sentiments, or even anti sentiments against French interests, French corporate interests, French mining interests in these countries. So it remains to be seen how things will pan out. I mean, provided that the same military that actually came to power on people's sentiments is right now working against the people's mandate. So Sitati, it would be nice if you could actually elaborate further on what we could anticipate in the near and immediate future.
Yes, and before I move an inch further, it's really critical to emphasize the fact that the military regime could be lacking, an official governing mandate. I think there's a very strong point which needs to be illustrated. Nonetheless, these political parties and civil society organizations, based on the fact that they feel aggrieved due to the suspension of the activities, we are likely to see anti-military or pro-democracy protests and counter-protests, maybe in the coming days or weeks or even months. And it's important to note that these protests will be concentrated in major urban centers, especially in Bamako, where these political parties and civil society organizations have higher mobilization capacities. And protests are likely to turn violent, especially if the security forces resort to violent dispersal techniques. But of course, the military would also want to paint a picture that it is not unpopular and it still commands, a large following among the Malian public. And so based on that, it's likely to organize counter protests in support of it. And a critical thing to mention is the clashes between, anti-military and pro-military protesters are also possible. Apart from these protests, which could turn violent and which could also be disruptive, it's also important to note that the end of the transition period in Mali also complicates the security posture as far as the armed groups are concerned. And this means that groups such as the Tuareg rebels, the Islamic State in the Sahel, and the Al-Qaeda affiliated Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin could take advantage of the evolving situation. As I've noted before, or rather as we have noted before, the perception currently in the country is that Mali is lacking an official mandate to govern following the expiry of the transition period. So these groups could take advantage of this to attempt to intensify attacks on the pretext of intending to call for civilian leadership or to impose rules or, in smaller breakaway territories in the volatile parts of the country. The Tuareg rebels have historically advocated for the formation of a sovereign Tuareg state in northern Mali. I mean, that's under the coordination of the Azawad movements, which staged a very, very strong resistance against the government way back between 2010 and 2012. And a primary factor to note, which really, influenced that particular rebellion by the Tuaregs, was the collapse of this Libyan state, which allowed these Tuareg groups, which had been hired as mercenaries in Libya, to flow back to Mali, and then that also came with the flow of arms from Libya across the Sahel to Mali as well. So that's a very critical point. And of course, the military regime would want to react. Maybe Ramu, what do you foresee as far as the reaction of the military regime is concerned?
Thanks, Sitati. Yeah, I mean, this is a very straightforward answer. I mean, the military regime could obviously fast track the national dialogue, kind of to dissipate the rising political tensions. Uh, but nonetheless, the political parties may fully withdraw from the dialogue to demand a reversal of the suspension of political activities. So I don't see many convergences between both factions at this point in time. So maybe any attempt by the military to placate the enraged opposition and civil society groups may not fully work in its favor. So over to you, Sitati. Like, what would you think? Like, how this would pan out?
I mean, we can mostly say that the situation is mostly fluid, but I think apart from the political parties withdrawing from the national dialogue, organized and spearheaded by the military regime, I think the Economic Community of West African States, abbreviated as ECOWAS, could attempt to intervene in Mali's political situation with a primary objective of, attempting to negotiate with the military regime to set a new transitional period. But now, this will be a complicated affair if we are to look at the ongoing tensions between Mali and the ECOWAS regional bloc. I mean, flashback to January this year when Mali announced its decision to withdraw from the Economic Community of West African States. And of course, Mali, in conjunction with Burkina Faso and Niger, have been accelerating the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States as an alternative to ECOWAS. So that would be a pretty interesting development as to whether Mali would easily, embrace perhaps any sort of mediation by the Economic Community of West African States. But apart from that, we could have maybe more, at this point, I mean, it sounds as if Mali's political instability is likely to continue at least in the coming months. I don't know, what do you foresee just to cap it all as far as political instability is concerned in the country.
Yeah. So before I try to like forecast how things are going to pan out within the Malian military itself. Yeah, I would like to kind of highlight the point that you mentioned about the ECOWAS grouping, because we had just previously seen what happened with Niger when Purchase government emerged in Niger, and ECOWAS eventually came out as a paper tiger. I mean, they couldn't do much. They had to
Yeah,
even reinstate. And initially, they had actually put sanctions on the purchase regimes, but they had to rescind, the statement. So yeah, naturally,
right.
even I do not think that ECOWAS can do much. And what would happen within Mali? Yeah, there is a possibility of a coup. I mean, this cannot be ruled out. A coup attempt, involving mutinying soldiers. So could reiterate the
Yeah,
public's concern. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, you really brought up a very, very pertinent observation there, and it doesn't just stop that. I mean, even for not just Niger, these are the West African countries which have had coups. I mean, Mali itself. You look at Burkina Faso. I mean, ECOWAS has barely done nothing to change the situation, apart from attempting to impose, sanctions. But I mean, these regimes have sort of, looked to other potential partners, like you see Russia. Russian influence, by the way, is growing in these three countries: Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. And part of that can also be attributed to, the structural and systemic failures of the ECOWAS. So that's how I also look at this sort of situation.
absolutely. I mean, that was a fine point. So, Sitati, like, could you give us like I said, a forecast, a geopolitical forecast of how possible? What is the propensity of a coup happening inside Mali, fueled by a rebellion within the military? Because it can be mutinying soldiers, it can be even those from the officer grades. Like, do you think there is like stability within the military? There is a sort of a convergence in interest between all factions of the military-led government within the military?
I mean, when you look at the political history of Mali, as far as coups are concerned, not just for Mali, but in most countries which are located uh, in what can be termed as the coup belt, in that sort of region in Africa. I mean, coups tend to fight back. Coups tend to fight back, and Mali, without any sort of contradiction, its military regime. I mean, you have those factions within the military. It may not be open, but definitely those factions do exist. So the possibility is still high that I mean a coup attempt is very very much possible. It's on the cards. It cannot be definitely ruled out at this point, given the fact that the current administration led by Assimi Goita, who himself is also a military man, has failed, to achieve the necessary objectives to take the country forward. First of all, he's not really transitioned the country to civilian leadership. You look at the socioeconomic, conditions in the country are also not really good. So all these conditions are likely to, give rise to a coup as well. But nonetheless, I mean, for businesses, what you're looking at this point is the fact that, based on Mali's risk profile, which is likely to rise in the coming weeks and months in light of the heightened political tensions and the evolving security situations, mean that they're likely to face, different sorts of risks. So political instability definitely is expected to persist. But I don't know, maybe briefly you can quickly summarize some of these risks which businesses should be aware of as they continue or they intend to expand in Mali.
Yeah. So I just have one important point to bring in over here. So it's very likely that businesses may face increased exposure to personal physical assets as well as financial risks, as well as risks associated with political instability, which includes shift in government policy. So you'll have to brace for the storm. I mean, very strictly speaking.
Yep. And just to cap that all, even more importantly for Western businesses with operations in Mali, I mean, they should also be aware of the growing Russian influence, which in a very, very significant way could, change the way businesses, I mean, business contracts are awarded by the government. The nature in which they are awarded could also change in light of the growing influence by Russia. So that's critical. Otherwise, as we finish, businesses with operations in Mali or intending to expand the operations in Mali should not hesitate to reach out to us, APAC Assistance, for bespoke risk assessments. Ramu, any final remarks or thoughts?
Nothing, just one point. Yeah, I mean, it's very likely that be it continuation of the military-led government or any other government, under the current circumstances, there is an extreme emphasis given from the policy and decision makers in Mali in terms of resource nationalism. So, given the fact that Mali is rich in resources and it is a chief exporter of commodities like gold, business interests, especially Western business interests, should be aware of the changing tide, and this is something that may not be applicable to Russian or Chinese business interests, but mostly applicable to Western business interests. That's all that I need to add over here.
Yeah, those are pretty impressive points. So, I mean, as I just said a few seconds earlier, such kind of businesses with operations in Mali or which intend to expand the operations in Mali should not hesitate to contact APAC Assistance for comprehensive and bespoke risk assessments of the Malian environment. Thank you for listening to us. Let's catch up in the course of the week for other audio discussions.
Thank you.